So Tom and Jerry are actually talking and singing? What has the world come to? Hey everyone, this is Rabbi's Blog Animation Bliss, and welcome to my Spotlight Cartoon Corner. So today's Spotlight cartoon we'll be talking about today is Tom and Jerry the movie. And before I get into my thoughts about this movie, here are a few words from the channel. Alright Animaniacs, now let's get on the social media train. Want to chat with us in 100 words or less? Then check out our Twitter account. Want to chat with us within a group? Then check out our Facebook account. Want to get the lowdown on everything dealing with animation on this channel? Then check all of the above. And now, we return to our regularly scheduled program. So, the movie starts off with Tom and his owner trying to pack up to move to another home. And Tom is trying to pack up all of his stuff so he could go to his new home with his owner. But then all of a sudden, Jerry the mouse comes up and tries to mess with Tom. And while Tom was dealing with Jerry, his owners accidentally left Tom behind. And Tom tries to go after his owners, but he ends up being left behind even further. And so Tom decides to stay back into the house to see if his owners would come back. But unfortunately, the house that he and his owners were staying at ends up being demolished. And so Tom and Jerry decide to move out and go find a new home. And it was there that they meet this dog and the flea, and they teach Tom and Jerry to become friends. And it was during that moment that gas, shock, Tom and Jerry started talking. And so now that Tom and Jerry discover that they can talk, they start arguing with each other. And of course the dog and the flea try to convince Tom and Jerry that they should be friends. And Tom and Jerry try to be friends, but they weren't successful at it. And later on in the film, Tom and Jerry ends up meeting this young orphan girl named Robin, who tells Tom and Jerry that she's trying to find her father, who was lost in the mountains somewhere. And so Tom and Jerry spend the rest of the film trying to help the orphan Robin find her father, while trying to evade Aunt Fig, who's Robin's evil guardian. So what are my thoughts about this movie? Well, I was very aware about how this movie was so hated upon because of the fact that Tom and Jerry were talking and the fact that it was a musical. But for me personally, I never really hated this film. I actually found this film to be really interesting, and that's probably because I consider this film to be an alternate take on Tom and Jerry rather than being canon. And because of that, I was able to deal with this movie a bit better than most people did when they were watching this film. So some of the things that I did like about this film was that I really liked the music in this film. I think that most of the songs are very well done, and some of my favorite songs in this movie were Friends to the End and What Do We Care. I thought that those were the catchiest songs in this movie, and I enjoy listening to those songs every time I go on YouTube and listen to those songs. And another thing that I liked about this movie was the premise itself. I like the fact that this movie is spent on Tom and Jerry trying to help this young orphan girl try to find her father. I thought that was a really interesting premise for Tom and Jerry, even though we don't see something like that happen in the classic Tom and Jerry shorts. It was interesting to see a movie that actually took that storyline and put it with Tom and Jerry and have us see what Tom and Jerry would do in that situation, how they would be able to help this orphan girl, since we rarely see Tom and Jerry help out people in the original classic shorts. So it was nice to see a movie try to explore that concept with Tom and Jerry themselves. Another thing that I liked about this film were the voice actors themselves. I really like Tony Jay's voice work for the lawyer that's with Aunt Fig, as he provides a nice menacing tone to the lawyer. And I always like Tony Jay's voice work in most of the animated films that he does, because he's able to sound so threatening and civilized at the same time. And he does the same thing here with the lawyer for Aunt Fig, so I really enjoy his voice work here. Now, my biggest issue with this film was the fact that the second half of the film wasn't that well plotted. Like, I felt like the second act of the film focused too much on Robin, and Tom and Jerry became background characters as a result. And I didn't like that, because this movie is about Tom and Jerry, not about Robin, the orphan girl that we meet halfway through the film. And that's the problem I have whenever you have these characters who meet up with human characters. The human characters somehow end up taking over the film, and the characters that we actually watch the film for end up being pushed aside. And that's what happened with Tom and Jerry in this film. In the second half of the film, was that when Robin gets introduced in the second half of the film, Tom and Jerry ends up getting pushed to the side, and they didn't really have much relevance in the second half of the film. So that's my biggest issue with this film, is the second half and how Tom and Jerry weren't as prevalent in the second act of the film like they were at the beginning of the film. But overall, I did enjoy Tom and Jerry the movie. Sure, it's not the best thing to come out of the franchise, and again, the second act of the film was a bit weak compared to the first act of the film, but I did like the fact that this movie did something different with the franchise, and I really like the songs in this film, especially Friends to the End and What Do We Care. So it's a movie I definitely recommend if you want to watch an alternate take on the Tom and Jerry franchise. So that's my thoughts on Tom and Jerry the movie, and tell me in the comments down below, have you seen Tom and Jerry the movie? And if you have, did you like the movie? Did you hate the movie? And what were some of the most controversial animated films that everybody hated but you ended up liking? Please feel free to tell me in the comments down below. Well, hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is Rabbit's blog, Animation Bliss, and I'll see you guys later.